Welcome back to another episode of A Gift from Adversity. Today, we are recording episode 28. I'm very grateful to have another guest for A Gift from Adversity. My name is Juri Love. I'm your host, and my book, A Gift from Adversity, is the reason why I am doing this show. My book, A Gift from Adversity, came out in 2020, and the subtitle is Overcoming Sexual Abuse, Domestic Violence, Bullying, and Homelessness. After I published my book, and this is my story, I had a lot of people come talk to me about their experience of their adversity, and I felt very compelled to share about adversity and then tools that came from it, and then the gift that stemmed out from the adversity. So we have a great guest tonight. Her name is Helen Ryan, and Helen is from California, and I'm in Massachusetts. So I'm very grateful to have her tonight. So Helen, welcome to A Gift from Adversity. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
Helen, can you please tell us who you are and what you do?
Yes, well, I do a couple of different things. I run a digital marketing agency with my now grown son, and I also have a walking podcast where I coach people to walk and we talk about different subjects like motivation, inspiration, and that kind of thing.
Great. So, do you have any website or social media people can check out and follow?
Sure. Walkingandtalking.show. That's the podcast. And Instagram is real Helen M. Ryan.
Walking and talking that show.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then your Instagram?
Real Helen M. Ryan.
No, Helen. Okay, got it. So, as I speak, there's a comment box that you can ask any questions. Ask Helen any questions. So let's get started. So, can you tell our audience what was your adversity?
It was a very difficult childhood. It started when I was probably about 7 or so and pretty much went until I ran away from home at 17. It was really really challenging. When I was, I think about 7 years old, almost 8, my mother ended up going back to Norway where she was from, and I lived for about 3 months with a relative. My sister and I did, and there I was sexually abused by someone else who lived in the house. And then after 3 months, my sister and I were both sent to Norway to live with my grandmother. My mother was in a what they called back then a nerve clinic. It was, like a place where, they could probably more like a rehab center. I didn't know that she had a drinking problem. I don't think very many people knew about back then. And we lived with my grandmother for about a year. And then when we went where we had a choice at that point to go live with our mother or to go live in a foster home. My sister elected, she was 5 years older than me. She elected to go live in a foster home, and I was 8 at the time, and I just elected to go live with my mother because that's what little kids want to do. They want to be with their mom. So, excuse me. So I did. My sister ended up in a really good foster home in the small city where my grandmother lived and where we lived with her. And then I moved in with my mom, and I didn't know that she was drinking because I was, little at the time. I was about 8. And then I remember the first Christmas that we were there, my sister came up and we were having Christmas with my mom, but she was upstairs throwing up because she was so drunk. And my sister and I were sitting in our robes in front of the Christmas tree, just like, okay, we were like 8 and 14, and like, okay, well, this is, we didn't know, like, it was so different from our lives before. So we didn't really know, what was happening. So little by little, my sister, of course, stayed and with her foster family, and I lived with my mother. And things got worse. She had probably several, but she had undiagnosed at the time mental illness, and she was well, later on it was diagnosed as borderline personality disorder, and there were some other issues as well aside from being an alcoholic. She was also very promiscuous, so I had to deal with that growing up as well. We lived in an apartment, and She would bring strange men home. Like she would take a taxi ride home, and then suddenly the taxi driver would be upstairs, and they'd be having relations. I don't know if I can say sex, but they would like randomly. She would have sex with everybody, anybody. My boss, when I was 14, I had a cleaning job after school. I was cleaning offices and staircases, and she had sex with my boss. I mean, it was like anybody, anytime. Like doesn't matter if I was there. So she was very very difficult to live with. When I was 14 was the first time she tried to commit suicide. And that was the first and second time were the ones that were most impactful for me. Later on, by the time I left at 17, she had tried to commit suicide about 12 times. So obviously she didn't want to die. It was just another call for attention because she just liked attention, wanted to be the victim all the time because, she was mentally ill and none of us knew it back then really because it wasn't really talked about back then in those days. So the first time she tried to commit suicide, it was in the middle of the night. Oh, my mouth gets dry. And then she came to wake me up in the middle of the night, and I didn't know what was going on. I also didn't have glasses or contact lenses, so I really couldn't see that great. So she woke me up, and I came into the kitchen, and then she said, "Well, he wants to know if it's true." And she was talking about her boyfriend. I'm like, "What?" So she handed me the phone, and he's like, "Is it true? Is it true?" And I'm like, and then I look, and I saw blood all over the kitchen floor, all over the phone cord, because we had the old phones where you actually plug them into the wall. And it was everywhere. There was just blood everywhere. And I panicked because I didn't know what to do. So then I hung up with him and I put her hand under her wrist under the faucet, which, I don't know, probably wouldn't have helped, but I didn't know. I was, 14. So then I called the emergency services and they said, we've already had 2 phone calls, which meant that she called first to make sure that they would come. And then her boyfriend called after she called him. And then I called. So then they came and they took her away to the emergency department. And then I was all alone. It was the middle of the night. There was blood all over the kitchen. I was 14. So I didn't know what to do. I closed the door to the kitchen. I went in my room with my cats and I just laid there and eventually I fell asleep. The next morning I woke up and I'm thinking, okay, do I have a mother? Is she dead? Is she alive? What's going on? So I called my mother's boyfriend and he says, she's here. This is all your fault. And then he hung up the phone. I was like, okay. So I had to clean up the blood because it was like, coagulating and it was like all over the floor. And nobody was going to do it. It was only me. So I cleaned up the blood and then I went on with my day because I didn't have anybody and I was all alone. So that was the first like example of like something really, really like impactful in my life. She did it again and again and again. But the second time was with I had come home from school and there was a note and the house by the phone and the house was clean. I'm like, why is the house clean? The house is never clean because I guess she decided she was going to take an overdose. So when I went, I saw the suicide note. I went into her room and she was laying there in bed with a tiny, tiny little pink negligee with no underpants on. So then, of course, I called the emergency services again and they came and got her. And I just remember feeling so embarrassed. They were like trying to carry her out and her whole bottom part was all hanging out and she was wearing this tiny negligee and I was just so horrified. And luckily my childhood friend came over and so she rode with me to the ambulance and we went to the hospital. But after that, I think I just stopped going to the hospital because it kept happening over and over again and it was like there's nothing I can do. And I there was no way I could do anything or handle it or help her in any way. So that was it was a constant. And it was a constant of men coming in. She would bring men in and get drunk and then she'd fall asleep. And then they would come into my room, but I wasn't going to have any of that. So I just had to always deal with like pushing strange men out the door. And I had my childhood friend and she was really strong and she would stay over sometimes and if they would come in, she'd help me kick them right out because it was like it was so unsafe and so I've always had trouble sleeping because nighttime has never been safe. So that was a constant until I was about 17 years old and finally I couldn't take it anymore and I ran away and I came back to the US.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that with our audience and on the show. It's a lot to take in. And as I was listening to you, that the magnitude of impact as growing up as a child, like witnessing all of these things and How did it affect you now looking back up to 17? Like, how do you think this adversity affected you?
Well, I think it shut me down a lot. I didn't realize until years later that I had PTSD because, it wasn't anything that people talked about back then. And it was like, well, only military veterans get PTSD. But down the road, I realized that I just shut everything down. There was no emotion. I was just going through the motions, going through the day because there was nothing to feel. There was nothing to do. What could I do? I was in a terrible situation. I was lucky that I did have an aunt in Norway. So when things got really bad, I would go to her like on the weekends and things like that. So that gave me and my cousins, I was very close to my cousins. So at least I could get away. I never talked to anybody about it. I never really told things about it. And people just, because there wasn't anybody else there except for my aunt and her kids, my cousins. And it was difficult, but I think that year that I lived with my grandmother when I was 8, my grandmother was very strict. And I had to walk, I feel like I'm saying these stories like I had to walk uphill in the snow both ways. But I had to walk really far to school in the mornings. It was dark. I was terrified. I had to go through the forest because she lived in the forest, hold my little flashlight. I was like, and having to go down into the scary basement. I think that year living with my grandmother taught me to be stronger. I think without that year, it would have been a lot more difficult because my grandmother taught me there's no such thing as fear. You have to conquer your fear. Doesn't matter if you're scared, you still have to walk through the forest at night. I mean, night at night in the dark because it doesn't get light in Norway. It's dark in the winter. Most just few hours of light. And so I really think that helped make me stronger and get over fear. I think she helped me with that.
Wow. And then when when did you realize that after you left or prior to maybe you leaving your mom, when did you realize it's not normal that you are experiencing?
I think I pretty much knew from the beginning. When my sister and I were sitting there that Christmas in our robes and she was throwing up upstairs, and that was the extent of our Christmas, I knew at that point because Christmases before that had not been like that. So I knew at that point that there was something wrong. And I knew intrinsically that other mothers didn't have all these men coming over all the time. And I knew that was and the drinking and the throwing up, and I had to call her out from work. And but I'm one of those helperton people, like I like to help people. I like to do things for people. So I was always trying to help her. I was always trying to help her get better. I was calling in for work for her. I would every day when I got my low paycheck, I would every pay period I would buy her flowers, even though, it wouldn't help anything. But I was just always trying to be a good person and a good kid. And I knew that that just wasn't a normal life that other people were going through.
Wow. And then after 17, like after you left your mom, what happened?
Well, my aunt, who I had been close to in Norway, moved back to the US. She's from the United States and she lived in Texas. I lived with her for 3 months, got a job working in the US just to get. In Norway, we have a different alphabet with extra letters. So I had to learn how to type on an American keyboard. So I was practicing all of that while I was working other jobs in Texas. And then I came to California, back to California, where I was born, where my dad was. So I lived with him for a while till eventually I got a good job and I moved out of his house and in with a roommate on my own.
So, first of all, I'm very sorry that you went through all this adversity. And just to let our audience know, when Helen said sexual abuse, that word alone, people do not understand the significance of it unless otherwise, unfortunately, you experienced it. And to me, the sexual abuse played the biggest role in terms of adversity, comparing to DV, like bullying or homelessness. That was significant, but at the same time, sexual abuse was the worst, I would say, of all. I know you have experienced many. Like, how did sexual abuse played in your life, and then how much of weight or effect that gave you or impacted you in your life?
The sexual abuse was, in terms of actually being abused, was a shorter period of time, and I was young. I was 8 years old. It wasn't. It was impactful. It impacted my relationships in the future, but it didn't impact my life as much as the 7 year, 10 year, 12 year, whatever, however many I can't, I can't do math, as many years as just living with someone who was so mentally ill. And luckily I was, when the people who were coming in and out of the house, they were pretty much drunk as well. And so they, yeah, I could put up a fight and push people away and push them off, or it could have been very bad. There was something inside of me. Usually I'm a people pleaser, but at that point I'm like, do not come near me, because I wasn't interested in any of that. And so that, always having to fend off strange men because she would get drunk, pass out, and then I would have to kick them out of the house. That made my nights unsafe. And there's still, I still don't sleep well. I'm going to be 56 in a week and a half, and I still don't sleep well.
Helen, I just wanted to relate to you. So this happened in Norway.
The abuse happened here, and then I went to Norway, and then all that happened when I was in Norway.
Okay. And then back then in Norway, there wasn't so much of advocacy or mental health talked about.
No, and I don't think it was much anywhere, because really, what was that in the 80s? Or late, so where I went to Norway, I think in 75, I can't remember, but and through the 80s, but it wasn't really recognized as much. And they were very, like in California, we're very liberal in terms of, and I'm liberal in terms of letting people out, mental health. But in Norway, they're even more so. They could not ever commit her. If she was in the US and she tried to commit suicide over and over again, they would do what we call a 5150, which is a hold for mental health evaluation for 72 hours. They don't do that in Norway. So she was just let go straight home and do whatever it is that she was doing. And she would always tell me, like, she sent me, I think at one point someone had ordered me to go to a psychologist, and she told me, you can't tell him anything, you can't tell him anything. So I went there and I couldn't say anything, so that was completely, not helpful at all, because I had to go to these appointments, but I couldn't tell them what was going on.
So I grew up in Japan, and the sexual abuse happened like again, like in 80s that nobody talked about, and there was no mental health talk. No, I didn't learn the word PTSD until I was like in America, like 21. So just to relate with you, however, you were in Norway and I was in Japan, and then we were experiencing the similar things that I definitely do have trouble, like sleeping, especially when I get triggered, and then and I have like a PTSD. I remember like one time Starbucks boss yelled at me, and this is way before I started counseling, and I didn't know what was going on, and I couldn't sleep like a week because not only his yelling like scene kept going in my head, but also it triggered of me getting extremely abused from my dad, and then all the flashbacks came, and then I remember like during the sleep that I would like scream and then shriek on top of my lungs during my sleep that my dad was sexually abusing me. And it just and then that abuse happened at nighttime for my case. So a lot of times I just scared. I'm just scared. Like what's gonna happen? There's nobody but say like even if you are like in the nicest place, like this is inside of your brain. And then now I know what happens is um the limbic part of the brain fires up where it stores the trauma and it shuts down the cognitive part of the brain. But I had no idea what was going on with me for many years until I did EMDR, and then my counselor showed me this split model of the brain, and then she explained to me where it's like what's going on inside. And until these education and then logics, we have no idea. So you mentioned about trouble sleeping.
Yeah.
What else like physically affected you?
I became a binge overeater because that was the only thing that gave me comfort was food. So I would always eat, 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 eat because that was like my safety. That was my, my comfort. So that was a big problem. Eventually I lost over 80 pounds and started to get back into shape, but that was why, because it made me feel good. Eating, it still makes me happy, but it was a one thing I could do to care for myself.
So when did it start overeating? Um,
I would say maybe 13 or 14 years old. I think that, yeah, I think probably around then is because things just got worse, over time. And just as things got worse, especially after that first suicide attempt, I think that's when I really turned more to food. I was also binge exerciser. So I would binge eat, and then the next day I would run and run and run and run and go to the gym at 5:30 in the morning. And then I would overeat another day. It was always, so I was slender at that time before I gained all my weight later because binge eating and then binge exercising back and forth, back and forth. But that was the only, sometimes we do that because it's the only control we have in our environment, what we eat or don't eat. And so that was my way of controlling something in my life and giving myself comfort.
wow. And again, like these things that, especially if your caretaker is having you a problem, and then she or he maybe they don't notice what's wrong with you, and then they are the one who's adding, and then you are minor. It's just extremely difficult to even recognize what's going on, and then either you're wrong or right, and then also like your health, how it's affecting you. It's just really crazy situation. And a lot of people say, especially like sexual abuse too, like a lot of people, I don't know specific statistics, but I would say like 70-75% I learned that the perpetrator for the child sex abuse or abuse are family members or people that you trust, people you have known. And
Hmm.
so that's sad. So it's not a stranger, like very
No.
few percentage of stranger with child sex abuse. But I really feel that is extra problem because your perpetrator lives with you, and then they are not there to protect you. How therefore you have no like getaway. You have no way to escape from the situation unless you moved yourself from the situation. I removed myself at age 13.
Mm.
I ran from my dad. So it it's just so sad. Like when I look back, that the people who's supposed to protect you, like your case is your mom, um, was not available and putting all these things to you or to me as well.
Yeah, I mean, it does happen as you've talked about with other people too. It's probably more often than we think sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Helen, thank you so much for being so brave and open, for sharing your adversity. Now, let's move on to my second question, which is the tools that you use to overcome these challenges that you faced during the childhood. So, before we ask your answer, I just want to share that this is episode 28. And when I started it, I had no idea how this show is going to go. But more and more, I interview people from all over the world and different places from America, that I realized that these tools are very powerful and then unique and helpful. And then I actually, for instance, I had my guest Kelly Edwards told me about the Rage Room in New Jersey, where you pay and then break everything, like any breakable, and then you just get the PPE and then just break. So I found something similar in Massachusetts, and then I'm actually book going and I booked the session. So there are so many modalities that people talk about, but coming from some people who actually went through the adversity and then actually use the tools, and that if you can share that, it's very powerful. So what was the tools that you used that helped you the most to come out from to the other side?
I'm not sure I had that many specific tools. I was always interested in psychology and I went to counseling a little bit, but it didn't seem to help as much because I would like tell people about my life and they'd be like, they would just like be sitting there and it was like, okay, well, this is awkward. You like, you're supposed to help me, not look at me like I'm a freak. So what I did is I read a lot of self-help books and I thought about my situation. I learned as much about the human mind. I learned I read books about, overcoming trauma. I read books about, abnormal psychology to a point where I could learn, like, okay, this has happened to other people. And knowing that it happened to other people was really helpful to me because then I didn't feel like isolated and I didn't feel, you know, as, as alone. And I just slowly started to work through some issues. I made friends who I didn't really share a lot with them, but I just made friends who made me feel safe because I think that's important that we have friends that we feel safe with. And then I married into a really amazing family. So, though they really welcomed me into a family, and I could see how, you know, another family was and like a real family dynamic. And that really helped me just being a part of something that was healthier. I mean, no family is like super healthy, but being in a healthier environment, that really helped me. And later on, after I lost weight and I started teaching spin classes, that actually, it sounds strange, but that really helped me a lot because it gave me confidence. And it made me realize, you don't suck. You're not stupid. You, you can do this. People come to your class and they like you. And that built an amazing amount of confidence in myself and really helped me overcome. I think when we do something that's scary and we master it, I think that really helps us heal any wounds from the past when you do something different, like you're doing the show. I mean, I'm sure that was scary when you first started it, but as you're doing it, you probably are even healing even now.
Yes, absolutely. So Helen, just to echo you, um, comfort zone and then breaking out of the comfort zone. So today, before our show, I did a sparring tournament, and I've been taking karate class since August. And today was my absolute first time doing the sparring tournament, and I've never done it. And it was such adrenaline, it was scary, and very, very uncomfortable. But like you said, sometimes those uncomfortable experiences, pushing your boundary and trying new things, can definitely heal. Because before the before karate, I was still really having a mental doubt, and then you know low confidence. But after starting to do karate, and then movement and then all that stuff, that I'm starting to feel more grounded. And especially like after the sparring tournament, I'm like, oh my god, I don't know why I did that. I can't believe I just did that. But then it gives you a different sets of layers of confidence.
Exactly. That's great that you did that. And that's a perfect example because doing something like that, the strength inside, what it gives you, and not just confidence, it's hard to explain. It gives you your power back when you do something. And when you conquer fears over and over again head on, you get so much stronger and you realize that nothing can really hurt you, that you can conquer this, you can conquer what happened to you in the past.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is a medal I received today.
Oh, cool.
uh,
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I came in the fourth place in four people tournament, so
But you did it. Didn't matter. You did it.
I tried. Yes, absolutely. Have you tried maybe any, so spin, you said spin class. Um do you find that physical exercise helps your trauma and then this adversity?
Yeah, when I was teaching spin, which was really good, and then sometimes here I have a spin bike, so I can just put on my favorite music and I can just it's almost like meditation. It's almost like meditation on the bike because your body's moving, you're sweating, you're breathing, but you just feel like this power and the freedom and just at being like at one with everything. It's amazing how that can really help free you. And walking is that's one of the reasons why I started the walking podcast is to get people moving because when you walk, you also start to think about things and you can resolve your issues when you're moving your body. And that's what I just found so magical. It's just movement really can help heal you in so many ways.
And I know that like walking or running makes completely different chemicals.
Mm.
It produces chemical in your brain, and that is very different. I was a truck runner when I was like really young, like 13, 14. So last year, September, I did 5K, and I never done race until like for like 30 years, and I just decided to just run. And then I finished in 28 minutes, so it wasn't
Oh,
that
that's
bad.
good. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
thank
good.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So
I did
then,
one 5K, that was it, and one and done.
so during this 5K, I remember like I was running every day when I was growing up, but then this one is um really like gave me so many thoughts and then kind of fear. But then after I finished the 5K, I felt really good. And then I also did 5K Spartan race at the Fenway Park with 22 obstacles, and that gave me another confidence. So I would say people who especially went through trauma and adversity, because you're so violated
Yeah.
and then you're so small, and your confidence just goes, it just really bad. And then I would say those things are very tangible. The
Yeah.
physical exercise, you sweat, and then you get like, you push your boundary, and then
Mhm.
I find it's very helpful.
And also you get stronger physically and knowing that you can handle yourself and protect yourself.
It's true. One of the guests said, adding that to my bucket list. Do something different.
Yes.
So, do you have any other suggestion in terms of tools that you think it was helpful to you?
Let me think. Well, I think that most people would benefit from going to therapy, but they have to find the right therapist because I think that it's important to find someone who's going to not wallow too much in the past, and where you can actually, okay, this is what happened, but this is what I do now. And that's like when you can get into groups too with people, like even Facebook groups where you can connect with people and talk about things, not in a negative way, not like, whoa, woe is us, we're victims, but how to move forward. And you can get tools from people, how to move forward from different people and get input from people. I haven't done a rage room thing, but I could certainly see that the rage room would be a great idea and I would probably like that. That was a great one.
If you lived close, we will go together.
I know, that would be so fun. And we can
That would be,
smash everything.
yeah. No, I've seen the video. It's crazy. And then they have a shield to protect your phone, so people can
Oh,
think.
yeah. That's so cool. I would
I
love
will,
that.
I would definitely post it on Facebook when we do
Yeah.
it.
Yes.
Yes. Definitely. So the Facebook group, I'm a single mom, so I belong to Single Mom Tribe, which is a private group, and there are about 800 of us, but it's all over, from all over. And that's been very helpful because this is a specific group that it's not just venting, but the information as well.
Yeah.
So do you belong to any private group or Facebook or something?
I belong to different groups, like a walking group, and then like Noom group. I follow the people like a Noom, the Noom weight loss. I follow them because I like to give advice unsolicited advice. No, when people ask for advice, I like to help people. It's a great way for me because I eventually became a personal trainer part time in addition to running my digital marketing agency. So I have a love for helping people and just I have the answers, so I like to share that with them. And I belong to a lot of groups for my business, like podcasting groups and things like that. But I was a single mom too. I still am, but my kids are grown up now, so I know what that's like. It's an incredible struggle to try to raise kids on your own.
There's no break.
No, no break.
Yeah.
So now they're
That
grown. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure your children appreciate you.
Yeah, they do. They're really, really good kids. I'm so lucky because and I overcompensated as a parent. I did too much. I spoiled them too much. I work for myself, so I'd always make sure I would volunteer in school and take them to all their events. And then I would stay up all night working to get it done. But it was really important to me to give them what I never had. I had no idea what it'd be like to have a mother at home bake pumpkin pie when I came home from school. I did that to my son. He still remembers it. Like, you sometimes used to bake us pumpkin pie. So they would come home and there'd be something nice for them. I did everything that I thought that a good mom should do, and overboard, I'm sure.
But at the same time, though, Helen, of all the efforts that you have done to your children, now they can carry on to their children.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they remember this pumpkin pie and all the memories and effort that you put in. I would say investing in your children alongside of investing in yourself, which is very difficult for people who survive this trauma. I think that's really, really ROI, the highest ROI, return of investment. I think that's the
Yeah.
highest ROI. Now, um, did you have just a question? Did you have any difficult time for in terms of a relationship with other people or even with yourself?
I was married or together with my ex-husband for about 20 years, and I was very also conscientious. I didn't want to sleep around, so I haven't been with that many people because I always strive to be the opposite of my mother. So, which is may or may not be healthy, I don't know, but so I just was very careful, but I have a hard time forming connections with especially men. I think I have a hard time forming connections with them because I don't trust them because most of the time they're going to do something, like not like that, but something is going to happen and always happens. And so immediately, as soon as I feel someone's like either putting me down or they're in some ways, like my most recent relationship was like, he kept trying to insinuate that he was so much better than me, like little like subtle ways. I'm like, no, can't. I just can't. I can't deal with that, and I can't confront anybody. I'm terrible with confrontations. When people want to talk about their feelings, I'm not like, okay, let's not, so that those are things that I struggle with, but I'm happily single. I have no intention of ever getting a relationship again because I'm busy and I have my kids and cats and I'm happy. But I think it did. Obviously it affected me with relationships. I have good friendships. I'm lucky. I have a couple of friends in Norway I've known since I was 13, 14 years old. And we still keep in touch. I see them when I go back. So I'm really lucky with friends. I've had friends here that I've known and yeah, I'm lucky with that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. Do you have any tools for relationship that maybe worked in terms of the boundary or anything?
I don't think I have much to offer there because I'm not good with relationships. I don't understand boundaries. I give and give and give and give and give until I have no more to give. And so that is my problem that I should work on. But I think that when someone starts a relationship, they should do less because if you do a lot, you're going to continue to do a lot and it's going to be expected of you. And that's where I make a lot of mistakes is I go 110%. I got to give everything I have, make sure they're really happy. Doesn't matter if I'm not happy as long as they're happy. So obviously that is not a healthy way to be in a relationship.
I 100% agree with you. I give and give and give and just break. And then
Yeah.
I've done it so many times in my relationships and it sucks. It's just really bad. But at the same time, to recognize that and then not having a relationship is one of the biggest things. I remember my doctor was saying, Juri, it's okay to be single. It's okay to have your personal space. Where in Japan, like, no, we were expected to be married and then have devotion to men, and then we were
Yeah.
trained to be submissive, and then not talk back, and then just be very, great wife or girlfriend or whatever. So that's been very struggle to me as well. Not just the abusive history that people sometimes label me as daddy issue or whatever, and so I think not learning healthy relationship when you are like young, that
Yeah.
definitely affects long term effect.
Yeah, it
I think,
does for sure.
yeah. But anyway, so let's actually move on to the last question, which is a gift that came from all this adversity. So, what would you say the gift that came from it?
I would say empathy because I I wouldn't trade anything for the of my life because I learned empathy. I can understand. I can talk to people. People feel like they can talk to me. I'm never going to judge them because I've probably been through it already. I am so grateful for the empathy, and it really helps me, help other people and understand other people. And that is the I think that's the best gift is just being an empathetic human being who helps other people and still likes humanity mostly, not all the time.
Can you tell some example of you being empathetic and then have somebody said that to you, some nice things?
Well, when when friends or family or even clients, when I've had training clients and things in the past, when they feel like they can come to me and they can talk to me and I'm not going to judge them, I'm not going to mostly tell them what to do. And just, they appreciate the fact that I listen with an open mind. I never judge them. If they want advice, I'll give them advice. And just this for them to have someone to come to, they've told me that like I like that I can talk to you, thank you for listening and for helping me and I didn't think about it that way. Sometimes it's nice too to have someone else who sees your situation a little differently and maybe sees the reasoning for a behavior or something. And so when people ask me, like, and this is what's happening and what do you think? Or, I just being able, just listening to someone and no matter what they say, I'm not going to be shocked and disgusted. I'm just going to listen to them and make them feel heard and make them feel like they have some value. And I think that's where the empathy comes in. It's like, when people need help, I feel for them and I will try to help people. Although I will go too far to help people again because that's who I am. But just, being able to not to realize a lot of people who haven't had any issues in their life, they can't relate. You're like, well, like with homeless people, there's a lot of people say, well, homeless people, just lock them up. No, let's not just lock them up because there's a reason they're homeless and let's try to figure it out and let's try to help them. You don't get that empathy if you've never been through anything. You're just like, these people are bad, these people are bad, and only my kind is good. I can't stand that.
Yes, empathy is something that you can never like teach people. Like by like say watching a movie can be empathetic, but experiencing it and listening to other people, just an example, I had this very profound moment where this is before I published my book.
Hmm.
I was invited as a guest speaker, and there were about 30 people in the audience. And I did this exercise of sharing the adversity with the person next to. And there's one man who refused to say his adversity to the partner, like a random person in the audience. And after I finished speaking, he decided to tell me. And he said, I don't want to tell her, but I want to tell you. And that was a lot. Like, no, that meant a lot. And then he was sexually abused by his father along with his five siblings, and then two committed suicide. And then everybody became drug addict or really bad. And then
Yeah.
he was in, I don't know, maybe 50s or 60s. He was holding his tears, and then he had full of tears in his eyes, and he was trying to not cry, but I could hear so much rage in him. And being empathetic is something that, like you said, came from adversity in a way that when you said sexual abuse, like my mind just like races in like 100
Hmm.
miles about my experience. So I am sure when people tell you the adversity, that not only you are giving them a space, but you're feeling it yourself. And then in a way, sometimes it's healing to know that you gave you gave a confidence for somebody to be able to share their story.
Yeah, it is healing. And when you can help other people or give back to other people in those kind of ways, it does heal you because it just helps you. Helping other people is really what life is about, and when you help other people, even if it's just listening, you can change so much in people's lives, and that's I think that's what's lacking a lot in this world is listening to other people and just helping them and being there and not judging them.
Yeah, we have a saying in Japanese: 2 years, 1 month means you listen twice more than you speak
Mhm. I like
when
that.
you want to learn something. But anyways, yeah, it's a beautiful gift. Unfortunately, this adversity happened to both of us and then many people, but we are all survivors, and then we are all not alone. And then especially in 2022 now, after the pandemic, a lot of people went through depression, isolation, and then a lot of people are talking about mental health openly, talking about depression, talking about isolation. And I feel more and more safe to talk about mental
Yeah.
health and talk about adversity and not being judged or worrying about losing a job. And
Yeah.
I think that is really important. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast as well.
Yeah. No, it's true, and it is accepted more, but when you say something, people were like, "Oh, okay, well, I'm not the only one," and then they feel like they can talk to you. Just letting people know they're not the only one, and, I'll say things sometimes about my life or say something because I want people to know that they can come talk to me. I've been through stuff. You don't wanna talk to people who've never been through anything, because they can't relate.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Helen, it's been a pleasure getting to know you. And I absolutely appreciated that you had shared your adversity, which was not easy, but I completely empathize with you. And then, I really think that all of us who went through difficulties and challenges, that we should never feel ashamed and we should
Yeah.
never feel embarrassed. And then we should always feel that something that was hard gave you a perspective to evolve
Yeah.
and accomplish something together, right?
Yep. Exactly, yep. The more people we can help, the better. The more people we can, just make feel not alone, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have a last word for our audience before you go?
Believe in yourself and do one thing, one little thing, because everybody's busy and with lives and work and kids. Do one little thing for yourself that you've always wanted to do or that you stop doing. Find one thing that gives you that spark back because a lot of times we lose the spark that we had if or sometimes way, way long ago. But do something that gives you a little bit of joy and feeling of accomplishment. Somebody may want to be an artist and they could just start painting, take a class online at home if you can't leave. Just life is so short and you do something that gives you some feeling of comfort and just makes you feel good, and go outside your comfort zone when you can, because that's life changing.
Absolutely. Just like me doing the sparring tournament at age 14
Yes.
with these kids. Oh my goodness. And then I'm actually doing a horse riding lesson on Monday. So I'm very excited about that.
See,
So,
you're doing it. Yeah.
well, thank you so much again, Helen, for coming in tonight and then being on A Gift from Adversity, episode 28.
Thank you so much. Good to talk to you.
Absolutely. And thank you to our audience for listening to another episode of A Gift from Adversity. And we have more guests coming in for April and then March, April, and May. I'm very excited to host. So see you next time. Have a great night.